This is the call to order of the Livingston Parish Ordinance Committee for Wednesday, May 11th, 2022. Lauren, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Here.
Mr. Mack?
Here.
Mr. Talbert?
Here.
Mr. Ard?
Here.
All present?
Old business, review, discussion, and recommendation of ordinances. A, detention basin requirements. I think we went over this a little in the last meeting, but essentially for detention basins in new developments, they're just requiring a 20-foot servitude around the retention pond, or detention pond, and a separate access road, 20-foot, that the parish or whatever entity, be it the drainage district or the parish, whoever has access to this detention pond in order to clean it and maintain it, and a requirement for a fence to be put on to where, and there were just questions on where we wanted to put the fence. I think we should just let at the time of the development, let the parish or DPW, whoever, go out and to decide where the best place to put the fence would be. I think this will be good because there's a lot of developments that have ponds that we can't really access. People have put fences up around the edge, and there's no good way to get to it. And primarily, it's private property, so we don't actually have permission to get on these things. And over time, this becomes problematic because they're not draining correctly. We have cases where people they want their detention pond to look like a pond, so they have like lakefront property. That's not what they're designed for. They're designed to retain water in a rain event and then let it go out at a regulated pace. And we want those to be maintained and cleaned and effective. So, any discussion?
Nope.
Nobody?
Make a motion.
Okay.
There is
Yeah, I
somebody
mean,
in the audience.
we'll get to it. You good?
I got something.
Okay.
You just said detention, and we've been saying retention, so I just looked it up. Detention pond is actually just a swale, basically a drainage ditch that collects the water and drains it out. It doesn't hold it at all. A retention pond is a stormwater control structure, which is what we're talking about, is a retention pond. So I know we've kind of been back and forth on which is which. So
do we say both? Retention?
see, that's a detention. It'll fill up, drain right back down. It's almost like a dry,
What does our ordinance say, Lauren?
where retention is actually a pond.
This is,
5-1.
it's going to be impact.
Our
So that's a detention basin. That's what that is.
So we want to say retention.
Retention ponds is what we're talking about, to have access around it to take care of it.
Okay. What in the ordinance is written, it says detention
yeah,
basins be
Y'all
ordained.
looked at it?
Yeah, our ordinance
Says
states
detention.
detention basin, and then, it gives the option for, wet detention or dry detention.
Well,
But we're still making the detention. We're still detaining the water. We're just not retaining, I mean, know what the design
What if we
standard
say
says?
detention/retention? So we
yes,
cover
we
both.
cover both.
Okay. Then we're gonna
And if
make
it-
this detention/retention, and we're gonna modify our ordinance to say detention/retention.
So there's gonna be another ordinance for this entire section to modify
We're just gonna fix it in just a second.
detention.
Okay,
I just don't want somebody
Okay, so we're gonna
digging a pond and then saying, oh, well, that's a detention pond. This is a retention pond. I don't have to put that around there. I see you grinning out there.
make a motion to introduce
Sounds right?
this ordinance with the understanding that everywhere it says detention, it says /retention, to be introduced as a to be introduced tomorrow night,
Lee had his,
except Lee needs
Do
to
I
talk.
do I have a second?
yeah, I second that.
Okay.
I got a comment, and it's one thing.
Name.
It's Lee Foster, and it's really to improve on Tracy's servitude. So you put a 20-foot servitude on top bank, which I think is good. But what I've done personally on our plats is you encompass the whole pond, because if you have a 20-foot servitude and you're working with an excavator, I have no access for that slope where that water's draining down. So if you encompass the 20-foot plus the entire pond and the access coming to the right-of-way, there's not an area in that feature that you can't maintain legally.
Okay.
So.
Definition at all should be servitude.
Yeah, so that's what we've been doing on our plats, because I've been put in positions where we got turned over homeowners and I didn't have access to go fix something at the bottom because that slope did not have a servitude, and that's where the pipe was draining into. So to encompass the 20-foot plus the entire basin, and it comes all the way out to a parish right-of-way, which means,
Understood.
and I would, as far as a servitude coming from a parish right-of-way to the pond, it's better to have that as one continuous piece of property and not a servitude from a homeowner, so you don't have to ask their permission. So that's part of that tract. So the pond tract, which that 20-foot would be part of it, so it's not a servitude of access to the parish, it's actually part of the property with a drainage servitude. So you never have to ask a homeowner on either side permission. It touches a parish right-of-way, its own individual tract.
So it's a standalone track.
It's a standalone tract, it comes to a right-of-way, so nobody owns it to fence it as far as the homeowner, as far as the homeowners on either side. That works better than
Yeah.
having a access servitude across somebody's property with they pay taxes on it and they could have the argument of legally fence it, and then you have to take it down. But if it's part of the tract, you eliminate all that. And that
Thank you,
drainage
Lee.
servitude access comes all the way to the right-of-way.
I agree with that. Thank you, Lee. Yo.
Thank you.
Can I comment on one
Absolutely.
thing on the signs? I know it's off the agenda. Okay.
Can I? Sorry.
Get with us out.
Sorry, bud.
Oh, we've got those two ordinances we can address in new business.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so let's see. So A should say, pond shall have at least a 20-foot servitude around the perimeter of the pond and the entire basin. Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, and
And the pond shall have a 20-foot deeded access to the basin for access of maintenance of the pond.
he's saying basically it's all included as one separate piece, the
almost
access
like that's a
area,
lot.
the pond, and the 20-foot.
Okay, so you don't want to put a 20-foot servitude, you want to put a 20-foot
Access.
access around the perimeter of the entire basin. Okay, so we're gonna leave the servitude and the perimeter and the entire basin. And then the pond shall have a 20-foot deeded access to the detention basin.
Yes. Now, do we want to address like the surface area?
A deeded access. I mean, is that necessary? Is that what we want to do? Because I'm sorry for cutting out a turn here. I'm just thinking out loud. I was thinking that the property owners were still on the property, you know, cut the grass, whatever.
They are.
You know what I mean? But if you deed it over, that means you're going to have to actually transfer the property. Is that, I mean, am I misunderstanding that? I don't think you want to deed that over. I don't quite understand you. Can you come up and repeat that? I don't know if it needs to be deeded over. I think it just needs to be a servitude or a right-of-way.
So right now, your pond is owned by the HOA. That's the legal owner. That's typically is what happens. If you don't have a servitude on top of it.
I don't think the ordinance actually says that. I think it says private property owner.
Okay, well, a
It
private
doesn't say
individual-
homeowner association.
Correct. A private individual owns the pond. What I'm saying is if that strip of land coming from that pond to a public right-of-way is owned by the same entity, HOA, individual, whatever, you don't have multiple parties involved with just putting a servitude across somebody else's property. So if you take a servitude and typically put it 10 foot on each side of the lot line, you have homeowner A, homeowner B, and then you have the owner of the pond. You have three people in the equation. If that pond and that 20-foot strip is part of it, you're dealing with one owner. If it's the HOA, if it's a corporation, if it's whoever gets it at tax sale, whatever it may be. You only have one party that the parish is having to interact with on the whole property. And that's from experience. So it just simplifies it 10 years down the road when that house sells 3 or 4 times and you're dealing with a servitude on a piece of land. that you have 3 different ownerships.
I guess, Gary, or Tracy, so when you have a right of way for a parish public road, I mean, how is that, what's the process there? I mean, would this not be the same process? I'm just thinking long-term, you know, the parish, DPW, the drainage district, somebody other than the private property owner is gonna need to maintain this detention/retention pond. I mean,
Okay, ultimately, right now,
so,
right now,
are we gonna deed over the, who's it gonna deed over to?
right now, the way the roads are written, the way the subdivision ordinance is written, the roads become the property of the parish. The land under the roads, under the new subdivision ordinance, becomes the property of the parish. So ultimately, the way the detention pond is written, they become, those things become, I thought it said the property of,
In charge, the drainage district or the parish.
right. So basically what we're gonna say is that the pond shall have at least 20-foot servitude around the perimeter of the pond and the entire basin, and the pond shall have a 20-foot gated, deeded access to the detention basin for access and maintenance of the pond.
Yes.
It'll be deeded over to who?
I would say the drainage district, if it's funded, I mean, the drainage district, if it's funded, they're gonna maintain it in that area. And the 20-foot access. So,
I was trying to figure out who we're deeding that stuff to now.
I think it says private property owner. And I'm not against it, I'm just trying to make sure that we get it right.
essentially, you treat it the same as the roads.
That's,
I mean,
me too.
I'm just
I
trying
like
to
it that
create
way.
access to these
I'm with you.
because it's problematic. Come on up. I'm sorry, ma'am. You're next, I promise.
Scott Lobel, 18052, Louisiana Highway 444. So, like, for one thing, whenever you guys accept a street and you own that in fee title, obviously, you guys are maintaining the roadways and the drainage and everything. So I think the question is from a maintenance perspective of the detention ponds, you guys are needing to decide if you want to own it in fee title. And I think what Mr. Lee was kind of speaking to is it sounds like currently maybe the HOA owns that tract. And if you do accept it in fee title, does that task you guys with the maintenance of it? I would think that it would. And then the question becomes, as the parish, do you want that or not? Or, you know,
You're getting it anyway.
what does that look like?
I'd say, do we want it? I mean, no, but
Yeah.
we need to own it so we can maintain it. I mean, I guess the short answer is no, we don't really
I think
want
that
it, but we need to have it.
The servitude, when it's platted like that, it does give you the availability to go on. And however, like Mr. Lee was pointing out, it may present challenges down the road to where a property owner would try to restrict you, but ultimately it would not seem like he would be able to, or they would be able to, because the servitude is there for your use. So I think the trade-off is you could not own it in fee title, and it could be either on a tract that is owned or by the HOA, or they let it go to sheriff's sale or whoever, or you put the servitude across multiple property owners, knowing that you may have to deal with that. But the trade-off is you don't have to own it in fee title and potentially be responsible for it. So that's kind of the discussion of it, in my opinion.
Or you could have it designed to where it's not on any property owner. It's just when they subdivide the property in
'Cause I think
development, it's
It's on
clear
lot.
and
It's a
there's
lot.
lot here,
Basically what
20
it
feet
is.
over, another lot.
Yep.
And so the problem that we're acknowledging is that, you know, with it being the way that it is with the HOA is that it's not by the HOA. So, you know, that's the concern.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Dry detention basins shall be privately owned and maintained as part of the development drainage system. So technically, I think Lee, does a developer maintain ownership and then give it to the HOA at some point in time?
Donate it to the HOA, and then the servitude on.
So that,
If it's over the whole piece.
so the developer would own it and then give it to the HOA, which is how we're doing it.
Yeah, so I think it should just be a dedicated servitude. I don't think it's deeded over. I mean, am I misunderstanding that?
No, what he said is when they draw a subdivision, currently now, they go to a parish right away, and then they draw that tract of land. They draw access from that parish right away to the pond, draw around the pond, and that's all one tract of land that's owned by the developer. And then when the developer will control the HOA until he's sold the majority of his lots, at which point in time he turns over to the HOA, he gives that piece of property to the HOA. Am I kind of correct in how that works?
And what happens if the HOA
Goes
doesn't
away.
exist and goes away?
That's the same issue we got now.
What we doing right now?
That's why we're doing this, so that when they do that, we've got access to it.
No, but then who owns the property if there is no HOA? It's going to have to me, it's going to have to, I don't know, that's just my thought. It's going to have to be private property owner's property, and you're going to have to dedicate a servitude to it, and then they're not going to be able to deny you access to it, and then you can go do what you want to do. And then later on in life, whenever we go and we say, you know, DPW / parish drainage district, the gravity drainage district is responsible for maintaining this, and here's the resources to do it, then we can go back and maybe come up with a dedicated right of way or deeded over something to that to the gravity drainage district. But for now, I think it needs to be a dedicated servitude. Go ahead.
Julie Dyson Norris, 229 3rd Street, City of Denham Springs. And I think that obviously lots of good conversation, and I think that if you would just include with the pond, it becomes a part of the pond. In addition to the pond, you also have a 20-foot right-of-way. So it just comes linked with whatever happens to the pond all the way down the road. Just easy as that. And then you have your servitude over that. But not two different things, not two different owners. It all goes in with the pond. Connect it with, so write your ordinance so that when you're required to build a pond, you're required to attach to it that access.
Thank you. So do we, in discussion, we just make the servitude, or do we set it separate? I mean, in my opinion, you
Lee, can I ask one more question?
come on up, Lee. Sorry.
I'm trying to get my head wrapped around this thing. So when you typically draw a pond, you start off one tract of land, which is a 20-foot road from parish servitude to the pond. Then you include a 20-foot section around the top and the pond all in one tract of land?
It's 15 right now.
15?
But yeah, so what I do is I include from that 15 foot on the top bank, all the way across the bottom, the pipes, outfall to the other side, all the way around, and it encompasses that. It's 20-foot minimum because that's what you need for equipment, but sometimes it's a park or something that's wider that touches it. But that 20-foot is part of that track. So if you vision a parcel to turn into 3 lots. Lot 1's the pond. It's a pond, and it's got a strip that comes between lots 1 or 2 and 3. When you transfer that pond and that strip to an HOA or another entity or long-term gravity drainage or something like that, you have one ownership, and you have the dedication of the servitude for access and maintenance for drainage to the parish, and that's on the plat.
Okay.
But that way the parish is dealing with one owner, and it's not on other people's private property. And it's a 20-foot minimum. If you want to do wider than that, if you pocket park or something like that, so. But you have access to a public right-of-way at all times, no matter who does what. Which public right-of-way would be the parishes.
Okay.
Okay, so A should say pond shall have at least a 20-foot deeded access around the perimeter of the pond along with the entire basin. And then the pond shall have a 20-foot gated deeded access to the retention basin for access and maintenance of the pond. It's all one tract of land. What you got? Okay, so this is, so basically what you're saying is this Xed out area right here, the Xed out area around there and the pond is track CA9 in this development?
Correct.
So that's one track of land?
One track. And it has multiple accesses that go out to the roadway,
Okay,
in this case.
okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Got that?
What about C? Keep it the same?
Let's see.
Yeah, it just says that it's
20-foot graded.
it just says it's got crushed concrete. You need to change
Yes.
it. Well, it's not really a servitude, it's gated access.
You just take out servitude for access?
20-foot gated access,
Say the 20-foot gated access shall have a crushed concrete or gravel base.
right.
Right.
So tonight, you're going to introduce the fence, right? In the right of way to get to the pond, correct?
Well,
So it's not going to be who's going to take responsibility to work it, correct?
We're just creating one track of land around the pond, we're just creating one track of land, which is the
That's
road
what I
in
wanna-
and around.
That's what I want to make sure, because I think we all had discussion
Right.
about this, who owns it, who takes care of it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
what happens, see this, in my mind, this was pretty simple.
Thought it was.
Yeah.
Okay, so,
Come on.
One last quick comment. I like what Mr. Lee proposed, and also by not owning it in fee title and just dedicating the servitude to you, then I would think you wouldn't get the request for like cutting grass and everything. It would just be specifically maintenance of the outfall type structures, and then that could be set up through the drainage district would be the ones that would come in and do that. And then so kind of with the maintenance of the detention pond, and I know we spoke about this last meeting, with setting up the funding or a taxing district or something, could language be added to this ordinance, or does it need to be a separate ordinance to be considered by you guys that would actually provide some funding that would, this provides us the access to come in there and clean out or
Talking
do
about if we built if in the future, which we hopefully, we create a taxing district for that development, we can address the language then,
And like for one thing, I realize that has to go through state legislature
Oh.
to provide it. So it probably can't be tacked onto this, but, I guess what does it look like to actively pursue that to get set up? What is the next steps to provide funding for the people who live in these areas? Now that the district has the access to get in there and do it, now let's set up the funding. What's our next step with that?
in the summertime, pass ordinance asking the legislature to do it, and then it'll be a local bill. They only have certain limited numbers, so we'll do it in this specific deal. We advertise it ahead of time and then give it to a legislator. He'll put it in the deal. Now, we gotta figure out if is next year a budget year, or was this year the budget year? This year was, one year's a budget year. This year they're doing a bunch of other stuff, so it's probably, next year's probably a budget-only year unless there's a special session. We'll have to just figure out. But I think local ordinances can go in the budget-only year. We'll just have to figure out in dealing with the like with Mr. Mincy or somebody else about.
I don't think that's what he was asking. I think he was asking, and I might be wrong, what can we do about the ones that are established already? If that's what you were,
Well, I guess I wasn't thinking about it that way, but I mean, either the ones that are existing or the ones that are proposed and coming up, set either
Well,
you
the
put a
ones that are
taxing district
existing,
on the
that's all-
existing one or an upcoming subdivision. And I know that there's with that step of having to go on through state legislature, I don't know how that process looks like.
I think just by ordinances in the last 6 or 7, maybe 5 or 6 years, that we've made it easier to access these things, just not real easy. The problematic ones are the ones that were put in 20 years ago, and they just didn't have any thought in going in to access these things. And, you'd be amazed that like people have put fences in these right-of-ways or these servitudes, and then you come in, you got to take that down, and they're like, well, that's not my problem, and so you have to get these people to say, well, you're going to take it down, and then you get into this battle of like, we don't really own it, so there might be some ways to attempt attacking the older systems, the ones that are that are 15, 20, 30 years old. But we can address that, but this is really more toward going future development, So, address it a different day at a
That I
different
was
time.
thinking of it too, but there definitely is a problem with existing stuff that's going on.
Yes.
That may, as far as the funding of those, but then you have the access issue. This ordinance that you're proposing obviously clears up the access issue for us moving forward. And then, but funding is still the lingering thing.
I think it
for
would
both
be,
situations.
you're talking about for the maintenance itself, it certainly would be.
Who pays for it, kind of?
Well, I think if it's in if it's in a funded district, the drainage district will handle it.
Or DPW.
Or
If
DPW
it's
if it's unfunded. And, it's not like you're going to get hit with 50 of these in a year. I mean, if you clean it and you access, you should be good for, a while.
Yeah.
So, okay. Did you want to reintroduce?
She's got the wording.
Okay.
Basically, we just went over the wording. I want to make that motion with the correct wording. She's got the wording there. She can have it in ordinance for us tomorrow.
All right, I'm good with it.
All right.
I made the motion, you go second.
Motion by Mr. Talbot, second by Mr. R. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Took longer than I thought.
Yes. But I'll take this moment to say I'm thankful for the people here, because a lot of times when we do these, most of the time there's no one here, and a lot of good ideas come from participation. Okay, item 4, new business, review, discussion, recommendation of ordinances. I think we're going to discuss 2206, which was the item that the parish president
I'd
for us.
like to take the contents of 2206 and fix the correction of 10% to 20% and change the definition from 2 to 2.5 and introduce that as a new ordinance. Make those two amendments to 2205 as a new ordinance.
Second, so
I'm gonna second it.
second by Mr. Ard. Any discussion from the audience?
So if it comes before the council and we pass it at 2,
It stays at
it
2.
stays at 2.
It'll stay at 2. Basically, we make an
If not-
introduction. If the veto override is overridden, then that'll be the ordinance. If the veto override doesn't happen, then we've got an introduction that in 2 weeks after Thursday night, we can vote on.
Understand, I just want everybody else to
That's
understand
where we're at.
what's happening.
We're not saying that the veto override doesn't happen. We're just covering our bases.
Anyone else?
Sharon Sander for 24411 Omaha Harris. I have questions about why we're going to 2.5. I know Layton vetoed what we had. I don't understand why. It's my understanding that the Home Builders Association is putting pressure on all of you to go to that. And in listening to the conversation in the council meeting earlier today, I never thought about I don't really care for the open ditches in quarter acre lot or small density developments, but that could work really well with 2 lots per acre and open ditches. That's a great compromise. I don't understand why we're going to 2.5. Is it the Home Builders Association that's putting the
Ms.
pressure?
Sandifer, we're not actually doing that right now. We're just covering a base because the override could happen, and this is moot. So, I mean,
But to be honest with you, we sat out here and listened to developers talk about, they're doing it at 4 right now. They prefer 3. Look, when I put the number 2, that was an arbitrary number to get a lot introduction. And in discussion, there was, I think if Mr. McMorris and Mr. Delat had their preference, it'd be 1, I think as a definition. Look, I offered the amendment 2.5 as a compromise. I'm not gonna, beat around the bush about it. Look.
But who are you compromising with?
Well, this is a cooperative endeavor between everybody.
Nope, none of the people, I have not heard one person say they want that. Not one person has said that. They all want
And
two or one.
I guess that in different areas of the parish, they have different thought process, and when zoning comes along, we can change the definitions in different areas. This is a parish-wide ordinance. Look, if I made the amendment, offer it 2.5, it didn't pass. The parish president vetoed it. I'm putting forth another ordinance with the correction and 2.5 in it. If the veto override happens tomorrow night, then this introduction will be mute. That's all I can tell you. But if we don't do this tonight and don't have an ordinance to introduce Thursday night, and the veto override fails, it'll be 2 weeks before we can introduce an ordinance, and then another 2 weeks before it can be voted on, and then the parish president has to sign it. So we're drawing out the
Then
process.
more developments get in.
We're drawing out the process before, I mean, look, this is a CYA move right here to introduce this ordinance. Nobody knows what's gonna happen on the veto override tomorrow night. This is a CYA. I'm just gonna be quite honest with you, because if it doesn't happen, if the veto override happens, then that'll be the law. That'll be the law. If the veto override doesn't happen and we're not prepared to introduce a compromise ordinance, then it'll be 2 weeks before that ordinance can be introduced, and then it'll be 2 more weeks before it can be voted on. And if
Excuse me,
you do,
I'm sorry, Mr. We're not going to, there's not going to be discussion from the crowd.
if you do the math on that, then the planning commission will have met another time, and the council will have met another time before that ordinance becomes law. You follow? So all I'm telling you is if the veto override doesn't happen tomorrow night, this ordinance will be in place before the planning commission meets again and before the council meets again. If we don't introduce it tomorrow night, then the planning commission will meet another time and the council will meet another time before this becomes law. This is just I mean, if y'all don't want us to introduce it, I mean, it's a pretty big gamble not to introduce it. I'm just saying.
Okay, thank you for explaining. I appreciate that. I don't understand why we wouldn't have a veto override, because the votes that we had before were 7. I don't understand. And when I ask for 2 lots per acre, what I'm asking is for my everything, my livelihood, where I live, my part of the district, the southern part of our parish, and we are one in this together, and we do need you guys. Thank you for hearing me. I appreciate it. I appreciate everything that you're doing.
The bigger picture on this too is zoning. If you zone this, you zone your area, you can zone it to this 1 house per acre. And that's really what it is. That becomes moot. But that's where we're at. We're on the cusp of that. So
we're 1 year away from that happening for zoning, but it's coming. Some of us is getting better along than others, right? But you hear these people pouring their hearts out to you guys. So tomorrow night we'll bring out some good information for the people of South Louisiana. None of us are against development. We all talked about the 2.0 in different sense. We bring it up 2.0. The last second, we changed it to 2.5. Nobody knew this. We all voted 7-2. Go home, you better think hard about it, please. This is the people of Livingston Parish that we're dealing with. Not the incomers. We all talk about the people who's been here, not the people coming. Please go home and think about it. It's going to affect all of us down south. I didn't do the north side on the moratorium. I did it on the south side. We know what it is to flood. 4-H Club Road, I'm telling you right now, I'm sorry, I get a little emotional right now. 4-H Club Road, you drive down Highway 16 on 4-H Club Road. When you get to 4-H Club Road, it comes to the blacktop. That deep of water, deer are all on the roads, am I correct? Think about it. That's passed already. They're gonna build over there now. Let's help the other people in the parish that flooded every time. Not 2016, but every year that we flood. Please, think about the 2.0. All right?
All right, Mr. McMorris, I had to respectfully disagree. Zoning is not a year away. It's not. It's not. I mean, it's not for me.
Not for me either.
Months. Months. No, Lee, is Lee right? No, I'm sorry, Scott. Her, she raised her
Hold
hand.
it,
Scott.
Let her go first. Right here in front of you.
Tracy Milling, 9450 Hill and Hood Road. I'm in the 4-H area that flooded before, but I just wanted to bring, instead of your 2.5, can we do half-acre lots and make that suggestion? Not 2.5 per acre, but make half-acre lots. That way there's no math. It's half-acre lots. So that's all. Thank you.
Scott.
I think for the people, obviously, we'd rather 2.5 acres per nothing rather than nothing, but the unknown is what's scary to us. And even if we had 2.5 acres all the way to we do some zoning, the unknown there is we don't even know if the parish president would veto that, because he's in his interview on YouTube, he said that he didn't support zoning. So it's just there's a lot of unknown out there that just got us worried. So we want protection from something. We know that we don't want the minimum lots the way that they're going in currently. So please take that into consideration. Thanks.
Scott, can I tell you, like that subdivision coming over by you, I asked the engineer to do me a favor, and I asked him to run the numbers on half acres lots with open ditches and doing the mitigation, and it didn't, the numbers didn't work. I mean, because of the mitigation aspect of putting, the land back into play to get it, the numbers didn't work. They ran the numbers to see if it would work. So, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is that I understand the half acre lot situation, and at certain tracts of land, I think half acre works fine. And we've talked about actually giving some incentive to go to a half acre minimum type. We've done it with an acre, and we've done it with 3 acres, and we've talked about, we did it on an acre net, and we've talked about going to a half acre minimum, and not doing it on a net, doing it on a half acre minimum. And it's something we batted around, and it is up for consideration. And we've just got so much on the table, and this seems to be a priority at this point in time to try to get these things fixed. But that is a consideration that we've actually talked about.
And one thing I think that scares the people is that when you talk about whether it's 2 homes per acre or 2.5, it's not just as straightforward as that. It's not 1 home on a half acre lot. There's still an ability to rhyme and scheme, without a better way to put it, to where you're still doing these smaller lot subdivisions, and they're getting what they're wanting, and we're being told that's what the market is out there for, which I don't know that I agree with that. There's just around my area, around King George Bay Road, there's been lots that have shown up. They're either acre or half acre to 2.5 acres, 40 of them, 40 new homes in that area. But developers on this larger scale are not offering that to the public. So I don't think we really know if there's a market there for it or not whenever we say that these things is what's driven by the market. I don't think we really tested the waters on that type of stuff. And I think that the public would be a little bit more at ease if there was something straightforward, whenever it's thought about. And then, it's even been mentioned that if they did the higher density with this, or those smaller lots on a particular piece of property, and this other portion of that property was preserved, like, we need assurances that the laws aren't gonna change and that property's gonna come back and get touched and wind up like the first portion of it
got you.
did.
I think Chris has looked, Mr. Moody's looked over the ordinance. We're fairly, I mean, he's confident that based on what this ordinance says, that when a track is identified and that section is deeded, you know, I mean, it's set up as the way it's set up, it can never be developed again.
I know we had ran through a scenario too where we were saying like, well, if we didn't do that the property could get subdivided, and then I don't see how they couldn't do that up front, like it couldn't get busted into two tracks and then they
Because ultimately, for your submittal and for that final plat to be signed, your density cannot exceed whatever the final number is, it can't exceed it. So it's gotta have land to offset it. I mean, if they're gonna have smaller lots and it's gonna be put on in a smaller area, there still has to be an equal amount to get to the 2 or 2.5 per acre. That's gotta be part of that development will be green space from then on.
And I think that's, you know, I guess the people don't have the confidence that it wouldn't be divided up and then passed to another property company, and then, you know, just, obviously there's ways to circumvent the ordinances. The ordinances have been circumvented in the past. It's kind of like NASCAR racing. If you ain't cheating, you ain't trying kind of deal. And just, you know, I think it,
Look, when this subdivision is approved and a final plat signed, there's gonna be green space that cannot be touched at a later date. And whatever the number is, whether it's 2.52, there's gonna be allocated land that's gonna be undeveloped, so that the density doesn't exceed whatever the final result is. And then we're gonna offer, I think when this is done, when this little issue's resolved and we've addressed the school board thing and some other issues that we've got coming up with respect to wetlands and how we're gonna calculate those in development, then when that is done, there'll be an introduction of a half-acre lot subdivision, and there will be some concessions given to the developer to build that subdivision.
well, definitely time will tell, you know, whatever we implement, time's gonna tell what the workarounds are. If there's a way around it, you know, it'll show itself. So
Trust me, I
appreciate it.
I didn't write it with there trying to be a workaround. Hopefully this thing is bulletproof. That's what we've talked to the parish attorney, and we feel confident of that.
Yes, ma'am.
Julie Dyson Norris. Tracy, I think that I appreciate your complimenting everybody for being here and appreciating all of you all appreciating the input and, of course, the concerns that everybody has and that their input is valid, and I appreciate you justifying that. I think, though, that 2 months on zoning, and of course we've been working on zoning for a while, you all have. And 2 months, I think, would be wonderful if that could happen. But as you know, there's public hearings, and just like Mr. Talbot was saying, how long it takes after you introduce it, and all of those things. I think 2 months is certainly very ambitious to think that it might be something that people could see implemented in that time frame. Certainly, we're working on it. Maybe you all can get it done. Then we start the public meetings, and then the discussion.
His map's done.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I would have originally thought we could zone the parish entirely at one time. But in my mindset, I'm not going to be as fast as the slowest person on this council. So when mine's done and my map is, essentially done, I will have my public meetings immediately after, and as soon as I have it, I will zone my district, and it will be done.
I understand,
So I implore everyone
Right.
else
when we hear you,
to
we hear
grab
you
it
crying,
and go, because
crying in the wilderness.
and I understand the
drum.
plight here. 'Cause it's been going on in my district. I'm developed to death. And I've been on. I understand. I do. My mindset has been, I have to protect the people that live here,
And I appreciate
But
that.
to-
We all do.
over the people that want to live here. So if we have to put an impact fee or a taxing district, my mindset has always been, hey, if you don't want it,
Right.
don't move here.
Right.
But there's a lot of moving parts that go into legislation, and a lot of things that I've always, look, this is where you're at, and I'm going to just oversupply, and this is what you're asking for. You have to be willing to go here, because you're hardly ever going to get this, and you get it over time.
I
you know.
agree, and it was interesting to hear, and I don't know your name, but to hear the thought that, 2.5, we might can work with that, and Mr. Talbot saying, we're trying to see what we can get past. But I think just what you just said right there is that, well, first of all, I want to say that I think what they're saying, and what they're saying, a lot of yours is already zoned. That's why it's not quite as hard for you to move forward with zoning, because a lot of your district is already there. Shane may not have that.
About a third.
I'm sorry?
About a third of my district is on.
Okay, all right, I didn't know that, but anyway, some of it. But what I was going to say that I think that might be beneficial, and I know Mr. Gerald McMorris has a moratorium, and he just said south of the interstate. And I live north of the interstate, and we flooded, and we've got the same problems, north of the interstate that people have south of the interstate. And I think you have a good working relationship with your engineers, with your developers. I've watched your meetings. It's been impressive, the things that people have brought to you and the work that's gone into this. I think that just what you said right there is that and Mr. Talbot's saying it too, there's so much, we're doing it. Y'all are finally doing it, but it's not quite there yet. I would like to see a moratorium for the entire parish for 6 months, for 3 months, for a few months, whatever it takes to try and get these ordinances hashed out and make those compromises with the people, with the engineers, with the public, with the home builders that, have an opinion, everybody's opinion. If we don't take that moratorium right now, I don't think we'll have the best product. And because you really do have everybody working together right now. And a moratorium is not to stop development. It is not to stop somebody from making money. It is to give you all the time to have that little bit of input and work through and nail this down, just like with the pond thing. It takes a long time to talk it out. So there needs to be a little more talking out on all of this. So a moratorium would give you all the time to continue the work that you're doing.
Anybody else? Okay, we got a motion?
I made the motion.
Motion by Mr. Talbot, second by Mr. Ard. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Aye.
I got one other.
I just wanted to, when you're talking, you don't have time to give your own motion. Okay, did you have something else under new?
Yeah, I want to talk about 125-25. You brought out something on the ordinance that you introduced earlier, and 125-25 is one that deals with retention ponds, and I'd like to amend that ordinance to make those retention/detention or detention/retention ponds, wherever it says.
Yeah.
So I'd like to introduce that.
I'll second that.
Motion by Mr. Any discussion from the audience?
Is that, Lauren, 125-25 is the only place that we talk about that, isn't it?
So 125-25 is also where they have the minimum 15-foot wide access. So I'm just going to put all of that into one, and we'll address that as well.
Okay.
Yes.
That's fine.
Add that to your motion to
Yeah, that's
strike
good.
the 15-foot? Okay. Perfect.
Motion by Mr. Talbot, second by Mr. Ard. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Nope. All right. That's it? You got it?
Yep.
So, item 5 is other business. I do have something for other business. In order to, and I can't just bring it up to where we're going to introduce it for discussion here at the next meeting. And this is the we have to have a zoning governing authority in place in order for when we do zoning, how that's governed once zoning is passed in the from the first district on. What I'm going to recommend is that we make planning and zoning. Now, there's going to be discussion. I know Mr. Talbot had talked about something about doing authority, different subsegments of that, but essentially, and just to give you a rough idea of what I have, because it might change with input, but everything's zoned. If you have an area that's zoned, or let's say a piece of property, and someone comes in and they want to build something on that property, if they are wanting to build something that it is zoned for, then the planning and zoning at the time can look at that and go, well, you meet the criteria, and it goes. It happens. If they do not meet the zoning requirement and they need to have it rezoned, then it comes to us. And if there is a variance, so to speak, they need a variance in the zoning, they meet the zoning, but they need some type of variance. Any variance from the zoning designation for that piece of property, or any rezoning of that piece of property, will come to the council for the final say. So if someone needs to rezone something, if it's zoned, rural, and they want to make it residential, they cannot do that without coming before us and getting that from us, or not getting it from us, and that happens. So that's just my thoughts on that. But that's what I have. Anything else? Motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Ard.
Second.
Second by Mr. Talbot. All in favor, say aye. Aye.